So, Rodrigo, coming in here, first of all, it's great to have you in person today. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
So let me start with what I thought was a great thing today. How did it feel? I don't know if you've done this before. I'm sure you probably have. Microphone in your hand, 50-yard line before the game. You got your chance to call the Dawgs. How did that feel?
Yeah, that was an incredible experience. Great to be back here in Sanford between the hedges to watch us take on Austin Peay. Second time being able to call the Dawgs, and it gets sweeter every single time. So great to be back here. Great to get to experience this awesome crowd and get to see another Dawgs win.
And by the way, I'll also tell you this. We're live here at the UGA bookstore before the game today. Rodrigo Blankenship among the many UGA athletes, both current and former, that were signing autographs here. So not only is the UGA bookstore a great place to get your UGA apparel, whether it's Peter Millar or the Nike coaches gear, Vineyard Vines, now Onward Reserve, all of those really famous makers that make him this good-looking UGA apparel. Not only can you find that here, great autograph guest each week, a chance to meet some of your favorite former Dawgs of the past. You can do that with Rodrigo Blankenship and players like that each week here at the UGA bookstore. And I'm sure, Rodrigo, you had a great time with Georgia fans today. But as far as the game itself goes, what did you see from Georgia here today?
I know that we talked a lot last week about wanting to see a fast start. And we got off to a really fast start last week. Didn't really see that this week. Had a turnover on our first offensive possession, and that really kind of killed the flow right from the jump. So I know that Georgia fans would really like to see us get back to having those fast starts, especially when we're going to be playing SEC competition next week with Tennessee. So we need to take care of the ball a lot better than we did today. The turnovers are not going to be they're not going to allow us to have success long term. So I'd really like to see us take care of the football better. I'd like to see a little bit more effective pass rush from the defense. I think we had one sack today. So I'd like to see a little bit more pass rush, getting into the backfield and getting to the quarterback. There were some good things that we saw. I thought that we ran the ball well. We had rushing attack by committee today, had several rushers get some touches, and were effective on the ground. I know, as you mentioned earlier, Gunnar Stockton was very efficient, just looking at his completion percentage, but didn't really have a whole lot of downfield attempts. And maybe some of that is by design. We're not trying to give away too much as we get into these more difficult opponents. We want to kind of keep our cards close to our chest, but hopefully we get to see that pass game open up and take some more downfield shots next week. Yeah,
you've played in the NFL. The thing I compared it to is, you go back years ago, the NFL used to have the fourth preseason game. Now it's just three, and the NFL approaches preseason different than it used to, but there was a time in which your third preseason game was almost the dress rehearsal. Starters played all the way through the first half, and then when there was 4 preseason games, the fourth almost felt like, well, now the roster's set. We're just going to get through this and get ready to start the season. And I'm not looking to excuse make for some things I think that Georgia could have done better today. I'm really not. But I said going into today, I almost wonder if this doesn't take on the feel of this is your 4th preseason game, your final tune-up before obviously a big step up in competition next week against Tennessee, and maybe there might not be too much to read into this game one way or another. As a Georgia fan, as someone who wants Georgia to win games, I hope that's true, because obviously if you did read too much into this, you might not read all pleasant things for Georgia, but ultimately, this team's going to be judged by how it plays next Saturday more so than whatever happened today, with a final margin of victory that wasn't as impressive as some fans wanted.
Yeah, I think that we would have liked to see a little bit more fireworks on offense, but it's okay. Really, I think if we're going to be fundamentally sound today, that's something that I think we really needed to place a lot of importance on. Like I said, the turnovers are a little bit of an issue, so hopefully we can get those cleaned up. I think that a lot of fans were maybe hoping to see the offensive line dominate a little bit more than they did today, just not having the same level of competition that we're going to be seeing in the next few weeks. A little bit smaller, a little bit lighter guys on the opposing defensive line. Would have been nice to maybe see them kind of bully those guys a little bit more than we did today. But, as you said, we don't want to look too far into it. We had some external factors that kind of threw off the rhythm and the flow of the game with the weather delay at halftime. So hopefully when we get into our Tennessee game next week, everyone's going to have their chin straps buckled and ready to go and bring their best.
If you want to focus on one of the positives, Ellis Robinson getting an interception here today. We'd kind of called for that Friday on DawgNation Daily to say, hey, if Georgia wants to force more turnovers, a guy like Robinson, who we think has some ball skills, he'd be a great guy to do that. Today that happened. So that's certainly one of the positives. And the flip side of that, also mentioning there, it's a Nate Frazier fumble that results in a turnover. It's a London Humphreys fumble that results in a turnover. So you can find good things to praise and some things you'd like to see cleared up too.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to take the good with the bad. Hopefully we can be a little bit more optimistic as best as possible in our evaluation of today. Had a little bit of weather that may have affected the ball handling a little bit, so we want to take that into consideration as well. But yeah, great points by the fan. We have some good, have some bad. Have to take it all in. At the end of the day, the Dogs won the game. Did some good things that we can hang our hat on and hopefully take into next week.
And speaking of the secondary, first of all, in the case of Ellis Robinson, started game one. Did not start today, but obviously was a part of the rotation. As a player yourself, when you have that young guy that has the look of potentially being, now he's still a work in progress, as so many players are on the Georgia roster, but has the potential to be what we think of as the lockdown corner, the playmaking corner that can force the turnover. How much of a lift does that give the team when you have a guy that could be what Ellis Robinson has the potential to be?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be great for the team. I think that when you look at the Georgia secondary, I think everyone wants to look at KJ Bolden and be like, this is our guy. This is our big playmaker. He's a guy that we can depend on to be really great in pass coverage and give us big plays when we need it. But you need the whole secondary to step up as a unit. You need everybody acting together. And when we get new guys like Ellis Robinson that step up, get an interception today, I've been in plenty of defensive meeting rooms, and the expression is always tips and overthrows. Got to get those. And so we got the deflection, got the interception there with the ball in the air. And so when you get a guy making a play, Ellis Robinson stepping up, a guy that we think has a lot of potential, finally starting to see some of that realized, it's really great to see moving forward.
And to add to that, Dalen Everett, who was in uniform last Saturday, did not play, was starting today, and by my eyes, I don't have obviously the full snap count in front of me, but by my eyes, seem to be playing a pretty good bit. So maybe that's also a good sign, because we know the Josh Heupel Tennessee offense wants to spread you out from one side of the field to the other. So getting a healthy Dalen Everett back, getting some much-needed experience from some young guys, that Georgia secondary are going to be tested in a big way next Saturday against Tennessee. So if this is a sign that Everett's now coming back to health, that's only good news for UGA.
Absolutely. Hopefully our secondary is trending in the right direction. As you said, next week is going to be a really big test, and I'm excited to see how these guys are going to respond.
Rodrigo, you mentioned the offensive line a little earlier. So today, and we expected this. We saw some shuffling. You saw Josh Jackson get the start. Ernest Green does not play, dealing with what Kirby Smart has called lower body stiffness. We interpret that to mean back. Probably is. I saw Juan Gaston before the game entering the stadium well before the dog walk, an indication that he would likely not play. And so you saw a little bit of a rotation that included Dontrell Glover getting into guard, Michael Weenie, obviously. Weenie even kicked out at tackle at one point in time today. So I think one of the issues for the Georgia offensive line that, running game-wise, the stats for that don't look too bad. There's obviously getting stuffed a couple of times on that final possession of the first half. I would say that overall it looked like a group, to my eye, that looked to be a little out of rhythm maybe, but also much like the story was a year ago, with so many moving pieces and trying to figure out who's the five that are healthy enough to play, for a group that depends on chemistry to play well together, maybe still trying to feel their way through all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. With the O-line having a little bit of shuffling, as you said, we need to make sure that we have that chemistry. We need to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So when you have some new guys slotted in there, as you mentioned, we've got some guys in new positions today as well that they're not usually accustomed to. All of that may lead to things just being a little bit off, a little bit out of sync. But as we talked about, the rushing looked really good today. There were a few instances where I think that Gunner was kind of flushed out of the pocket on some passing plays, and so you're going to want to make sure that you get back in the film room and clean those things up, especially when we get to Tennessee. Those defensive linemen are going to be bigger, stronger, faster than the guys that we saw today, so they're really going to have to bring their A game for next week.
Rodrigo, you've got the experience of playing in Neyland Stadium, obviously in 2017. Big win for your program there. But for a lot of these young guys getting ready to go into a truly hostile environment for the first time, what's that going to be like?
It's going to be an experience like I think a lot of these guys have never had before. I remember when we went to Tennessee in 2017, packed out stadium, a lot of excitement and hype for the Tennessee program going into that year, and it was one of the loudest environments I've ever been in, along with Death Valley and LSU. And I remember not being able to hear myself think getting ready for the opening kickoff in that game. So it's going to be a crazy environment. Coach Smart, I'm sure, is going to have the music blasting, full go. Rocky Top is going to be playing, and the entire campus is going to hear it this week because he's got to do everything possible to get these guys ready for this environment.
The other thing that Joseph brings up, and I have to be honest about this, I couldn't look y'all in the eye through the camera if I wasn't candid with you. I love Georgia football. I love every minute of the season. But when this first half came to a close the way that it did, and then just like that, it's a lightning delay that seemed to last forever. I got to tell you, for a good while tonight, I was pretty miserable. I just have to be honest with you. Georgia's not playing well. The weather's terrible. Thankfully, it got a little better in the second half. But there was a moment right there around halftime where I have to confess, like a lot of Georgia fans, I probably wasn't having a great time.
Yeah, I think that sequence at the end of the first half when we're inside the 5-yard line, I definitely think that there's going to be a lot of questions raised about the play calling, where we have some quick passing plays attempted there, but then we try and run it in when we've only got about 4 seconds left. And the previous couple passing plays had only taken maybe 3 seconds apiece. They're quick hitting. It's either a touchdown or it's incomplete. And with 4 seconds left, I believe it was still third down as well. If you try one more pass attempt, you might, even if you don't complete the pass, you might still have 1 second left on the clock and get to try a field goal to go into halftime. So I think that they're probably going to go back and look at that as a coaching staff and probably say, hey, we probably could have handled this a little bit better than we did going into halftime, and maybe take it into the locker room on a little bit higher note than we did.
And to my eyes, it seemed like that was the shakiest moment for the offensive line. Second half, it feels like, and maybe someone will correct me on this, we saw more of Bo Hughley coming in and playing offensive tackle, and to my eyes anyway, felt like the offensive line may have stabilized with Hughley in the game. We'll obviously evaluate that more as we go throughout the week. Rodrigo, I'm glad you're here because I think that you're obviously a sharp analyst. In my opinion, I think it's safe to say I don't know that Gunnar Stockton looked comfortable today. Now, is that because Gunnar wasn't comfortable with himself, or was he uncomfortable with the offensive line that's in front of him? I won't be able to fully diagnose that. I'm not even sure I necessarily want to try. But just on a simple descriptive basis, do you think it's safe to say that Gunnar Stockton did not look comfortable today?
You know, I think that would be a good way to put it. Everything just felt a little off, a little bit out of sync today. But I would also like to point out, in all of the analysis of the offensive struggles today, we did have a 98-yard touchdown drive.
That's exactly right.
After the goal line stand, where
exactly
Austin Peay
right.
was down inside the 5-yard line, our defense stuffed them, and then we went on to have a 98-yard touchdown drive right after that, and really, made me feel a lot better about the team leaving this game. And so, even though there's going to be a lot of talk about the struggles that we had, we did put together a very substantial drive at the end of the game, and I think that there's going to be a lot of positives to take away from that moving forward.
17 plays also in the second half there, so when Georgia had to, it did lean on its running game. That's the thing that they said during the offseason they wanted to do. That's what a lot of us said we wanted to see. So I think Rodrigo's exactly right. It's more than fair to say this needs to be better. I'd like to see more of that. But you got to couple it with what they did do. And they did, other than the one Nate Frazier fumble, I think lean on the running game pretty well. It is true that, boy, this defense had a couple of opportunities where it could have given up a touchdown, and it just did not want to. And, they're flying around, and it does remind you of, in those moments anyway, some of the Georgia defenses of the recent past, and that's what you want to see. Now, obviously, how they handle a road spot next week, which in the SEC, it's just gotten very tough to win on the road, that's going to judge that group, of course, but I do think there's a lot of promise right now being shown by the Georgia defense. Glad to have that as a part of the storyline here today as well.
Yes, absolutely. We touched on the turnovers earlier, and typically turnovers are not going to put your defense in a great spot on the field when they head back out there. Usually your defense is going out and having to defend a short field, and that was the case a couple times today. But, as we mentioned, the defense really bowed up, really showed up when they needed to, kept Austin Peay out of the end zone for the game, which was great. A couple field goals, it's all right. Obviously, I am never going to be one to cheer against fellow specialists.
Sure, I understand that.
I know how tough
it's a fraternity, right?
It is. It's a fraternity. So, I'm never going to cheer against that. But our defense did great today, and I think they're going to have a lot of positives to take away and build on for next week.
I think the story with Dwight Phillips is an interesting one. So, comes out of high school, he's a world-class speedster, and you wonder, can this guy be a traditional running back? Is that the role that he can fill? Well, now he's put on some weight. He had his first touchdown last year against Florida, and pretty clearly right now, Georgia has 3 running backs that it really trusts. Phillips is one of those. Chauncey Bowen's the other. Nate Frazier is the third. That's the trio right now for Georgia at running back. And I kind of agree with James on this, that now 2 weeks into the season, before the year began, I certainly had Phillips, because of what we had been hearing from practice, as a guy that was likely going to play, and because of his speed and elusiveness, going to be a part of the Georgia offense. And yet I feel like with every passing moment, I'm upgrading what I think his potential is, to the point right now where, I do want him in a game. I kind of understand at the goal line, it's not the biggest guy in the world. You want a bit of a bigger set maybe in there, even though you got stuffed on a couple of running plays. You want the bigger set in there. But pretty clearly, in some of the biggest moments of this season, Dwight Phillips is going to be on the field for Georgia.
Yes, I agree. As you said, I think that when you see him on the field, you get the ball in his hands, it feels like something exciting is about to happen any moment he gets the ball. It feels like he's a home run threat, and I do think that we need to make sure that we get him some touches every single game because he's got that world-class speed, and I think if we can get him out into the open field, he can make some things happen. So I do hope that we get to see more of him. We do kind of have a three-headed monster, so to speak, with our three guys that all got touches today. We also have Cash Jones, who comes in on third downs, is really good out of the backfield and can make some things happen, and we saw a few plays from him as well today. So I'm really excited about Georgia's running backs. We all have really high hopes and high expectations for them. And then the other point that he had made talking about Gunner earlier in his question, something that I feel like we didn't see as much from Gunner today, and this was more on the play calling, is we didn't see as much design quarterback run today.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that maybe that contributed in some small way to Gunner's lack of comfortability because, I like to see Gunner get out there and make some moves and run over some people, and he was really effective with his legs last week, and we didn't get to see as much of that this week. And so maybe if we can get Gunner a little bit more involved in the run game next week, that will help and translate to a little bit more comfortability setting up the pass game.